Hi, everyone. This is Nick Von Walkerbarth, and you're listening to the VonDubCast. If you want to skip right to the interview, skip 12 minutes. But before you do, please consider subscribing to the podcast on whatever podcast app you listen on. Please consider going to the YouTube page for the VonDubCast and subscribing there, following the social media pages, and also telling a friend if you like the episode. Thanks. All right, welcome to episode 54 of the VonDubCast. You are getting absolute prime Nick Von Walkerbarth right now. 2 days into a ski trip, me and my girlfriend are just both absolute bags of shit right now. We can barely move any muscle in our body because we just absolutely sent it for 2 days in Jasper on the hill. And yeah, we're paying the price, but it was such a fun weekend. I had a blast here. I forgot how much fun skiing was. Hitting jumps like I'm 14 still, not caring about hurting myself. And for the first time in a long time, didn't manage to actually hurt myself, just the soreness and the bumps and bruises of the fun. So yeah, no, it was quite the day. Great episode for you guys today. I really enjoy doing episodes with podcasters because they know the flow. They're willing to kind of go wherever it is. And this one might be one of the shorter ones, but I learned a lot, and I like to chat with guys like this and kind of pick their brain on how they do things. And I always learn stuff about how I want to do the podcast and little things like that. So I really personally enjoyed that too. He has two podcasts. I guess I should say the guest name. Hey, Erik Allen is the guest today, and he's got two podcasts. The Top Rated MMA podcast, or no, am I messing the name up? Top Rated MMA podcast and the Erik Allen Show. Those are the two. And the Erik Allen Show is kind of. I don't want to put labels on it myself because that's his show, but the ones I listen to, it has a lot of entrepreneurs on it. He likes to talk to them about their journey, what tips and tricks they use, just kind of if they're successful, how did they get there and what would they want to pass on? And he's reads and watches a lot of self-help stuff. Actually got to talk to him about it a bit on here because I like a lot of that self-help stuff. I probably say a lot of things that sound very self-helpy as well. And I don't watch a lot of that stuff personally, but I do see the benefit of it. But I also am always kind of worried because cults always say the same shit that self-help people do. And it kind of creeps me out. So every time I hear that language, I'm always, doing the guess, is this a Ponzi scheme? Is this a multi-level marketing scheme? Or is this people that genuinely just want to help? And it sounds very similar, and actually I got to ask Erik about that because he's into it. I just asked him if he sees that as well, and if he ever watches out for that. And we actually had quite an interesting conversation about that. So I'm glad I brought it up, and I was glad he took it well. I wasn't insulting to him. So yeah, that's the Erik Allen Show. And then the Top Rated MMA Show is a show he's been running for a couple years now, and he brings on up and coming MMA fighters from the regional scenes and talks to them as well about how they got to that point. And I was very eager to talk some MMA with Erik, but it seems like he doesn't really watch too much of the mainstream MMA. He's more into kind of the underground stuff, which is very cool to me. It's kind of the complete opposite, as I only catch people once they hit a certain level, or if I maybe get a heads up on a podcast as somebody coming into the scene. But he's kind of the complete opposite and finds these guys out and tries to give them that first platform to really tell their story. And all the episodes are shorter, right? 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe a couple longer ones in there, but he really likes the shorter format, which for anybody that's listened to any of the episodes of mine before knows I'm the complete opposite, and I like to really let it flow and see where things go. But I got to ask him about that too and kind of what he decided on, and I was really happy with his answer. And it's pretty much the same answer I gave for why I, enjoy the long podcast. I don't want to ruin it for you guys, but you'll get to hear it. But it was kind of interesting. I'm always curious about these questions, and I think maybe in the first couple episodes of the podcast when I was first doing it, I would stay away from those questions where, I don't mean them to be insulting by any means, but some of them can be, and I would maybe just stay away from those questions altogether instead of taking the risk. And I found I did that a couple times on this podcast and got really interesting answers, and they were taken well. I think I always just worry that I'm going to insult people. I have a weird thing about being as convenient as possible for everybody around me, because I'm such an inconvenient person that I try to make up for it that way. I'm getting a little grin from my girlfriend there because she knows all about it, my impossibilities. But yeah, so this was a really fun episode, a little shorter one. I know people don't always like the 3-hour one, so it's a nice little quick hitter for you guys. Really interesting guy. Check him out, please. hit up his podcast if you like any of the episodes. Maybe drop a comment on his social media. He's very active there. He's always trying to grow his brand and that sort of stuff, which is something that I am awful at, and I think I need to take a few tips from it, but I just can't seem to bring myself to do some of those Facebook or TikTok stuff that you got to do to be up with the kids these days. It's just not within my repertoire, but hey, that's all right. I'll pick and choose the pieces that I can do and do the best with that, and just concentrate on making these episodes good for you guys. Have some really fun ones in the tank. I mean, skiing this weekend with Drew and his girlfriend has been so much fun, and chatting about that episode we got to record a couple weeks ago that'll probably come out a couple weeks after this, and some of the stories from it, some of the laughs. I think as always, probably everybody that comes on the podcast is a little nervous for it to come out, but I'm the opposite. I cannot wait for those episodes to go out. Everyone around me is trying to hold me back from just releasing 4 episodes a week until I get up to those Slave Lake ones right now. But because I always do that, I get all antsy about not having enough episodes. I get a bunch banked, and then I release them all because I'm excited to get them out to you guys. So I'll try and maybe do some 2 a weeks here coming up and get a little closer. There's some great ones with the mayor of Slave Lake. Travis Malbuff was on one. If anybody knows him, one of my buddies growing up in Slave. And then Drew Discover and his brothers as well, probably my best friend growing up. And those are some really cool interviews that maybe give a different side. I think when I first started this podcast, I kind of pigeonholed myself into one type of conversations and what we can talk about. And those ones were a little bit different. So I'm excited for you guys to hear those and see what you think of them. I think it's really I think some people probably will like them less than what I've been doing so far, and some people will like them a hell of a lot more. And I think that was an interesting reaction to talk to people when I went back home to Slave, just because when I started this podcast, it was COVID, and I haven't really had that much face-to-face interaction other than some DMs and stuff about what people are enjoying about the podcast. And the thing I got from a lot of people was, hey, like, really sorry, but I only listen to the ones that I know the people on, which is fine, right? And I understand that, especially as I'm getting going and, I'm learning how to be a good host with everybody. So I'm hoping that some episodes like this are maybe a little shorter. Maybe people can give a little bit of a try, especially guys like Erik, where I didn't know him from Adam, right? Like I met him on a Facebook message board about who wants to be guests on podcasts, and I just saw MMA. He had an MMA podcast. I was like, oh, I'll reach out, and then he said, yeah, I can do it like 3 months in the future. So I wrote it down the calendar, and then it showed up there. I just thought like, oh, at this time, like I wasn't looking for people 3 months in the future, but I'll mark it down and we'll make it happen, and maybe we're maybe it'll be an awesome podcast. So when it was building up, I downloaded probably 5 or 10 of his episodes of both podcasts, like probably 5 each. Like I said, they're only 20 minutes long at double speed. It's a 10-minute episode, so you can crush through 5 of them pretty easily. And yeah, it was cool to kind of see who he is and where he comes from. And I think that was one of the things I was disappointed with the shortness of his episodes. I never really got to hear much of his story, so it was interesting to ask him a couple questions about it here. Came from a very I don't want to say trauma filled, but difficult upbringing, had seen some things, had gone through some things, and for him to come out of it on the other side with a beautiful family and a passion and a drive that you can see in everything that he does is pretty impressive to me. That's the type of things that I find myself very lucky that I get to have these long form conversations with people like that have accomplished things like that, because I think you can always pick up 1 or 2 things about how they live their life. Maybe it's not very applicable. We're very different people, which I think we are, but there's just a couple things here and there about resilience and about the things that he's picked up listening to all those self-help type things. I think you can pick up those small little pieces, and it makes it really worth it. So I'm feeling thankful. I've had 2 awesome weekends in a row, one in Slave Lake reconnecting, one in Jasper just having fun. And I think those 9 or a year of COVID, I guess, really makes you forget how fun some of these things are that you can get out and do. So, I couldn't recommend it to anybody more. Like, find something you love and get out there and do it on a weekend. Like, there's ways around all these rules and all this stuff, but if you can do it safely, like we did here in Jasper, we got our 20-minute slots in the hot tub and face masks everywhere you walk outside and all this stuff. And, on the ski hill and all this. It was absolutely ridiculous, the kind of regulations they have in place that had no rhyme or reason to them, but maybe it makes them feel safe. Maybe it covers some liabilities. Who knows? But even within all that, there's those times in between where you forget there's a pandemic on. You're just flying down a mountain, hitting some jumps, doing some sick grabs, getting some sick air. Maybe I'll have some pictures or videos to post of my idiot self going poleless with snow blades. I don't know if you guys know what snow blades are. That's probably a topic that needs to come up on the podcast, because I got chirped hard when we got to Jasper about me going poleless with snow blades, which are these skis that are probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 feet long. They're very small, but they're the funnest thing. It feels like you're down. It feels like skating on ice with hockey skates, but downhill, and the control you get and the fun you have. And slowly but surely, our whole crew, first day it was just me blading, then I got somebody to rent them, then second day, my legs are sore. I said, try out some blades. We had the whole crew but one on blades by the end of this thing. These are taking over the world. Just you wait. You're going to see snow blades 2023. Move over snowboards. They're coming in. So we just had a ball of a time ripping through those trees, hitting these moguls, hitting these trails that nobody really gets to get to because they don't brave the tree whips and the whoop-de-whoops that you hit in these trees that make you knee yourself in the tits. It's the funnest shit. You can't match it anywhere. And I think I forgot how much I enjoyed it. And I think I might have to maybe sneak one more trip to Jasper in this year before the snow all melts. And then next year, definitely going to move that up on the priority list to make sure I get at least 2 trips in, maybe plan a little better than this year where it was just kind of thrown together last minute. But I don't know, something about throwing something together last minute also has a really special twinge to it, because we just had a ball. We ate it up, didn't really have anything planned for dinner, just figure things out and get our little 20-minute hot tub times in when we can, when we're allowed, if we get our rations. And we made the best of it. We've had a ton of fun. Watch the Oilers spank the Jets. Spanked them. Yeah, fuck you too. We have fun here. Oh, what else? I don't know. I've been having a great time. I almost feel guilty talking about the good times I have, because I feel like if people are stuck at home or, locked in with COVID, they probably don't want to hear about me just off having a ball. But I don't know. Fuck you guys. I'm having a great time. Join in. This is a really fun episode. Hope you guys enjoy it. And like I said, I cannot wait to get to some of these episodes we have recorded. So, keep your ears out for those ones. They'll be coming soon. Like we say every time, social media, if you could give it a follow, maybe share one of the post announcements, that always helps. Telling a friend about these podcasts, if you hear one on a topic that somebody likes, just passing it along. That's really how these things grow. You can do all the little things, the rate, review, and subscribes, and please do that too. Don't get me wrong, I love all the traditional ways, but I truly think that the only way a podcast spreads is by somebody telling someone else about it, and goes on from there. It's kind of a slow burn and a slow build, but that's what we're in for. That's what we knew we were getting in for when we started this little journey here. So anything you guys can do to help, I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you guys in the outro. Bye. Thanks for being here, Erik. It's a big honor to have you on.
Man, thank you. Such an honor to have to be on your show as well, man. Thank you for the invite. Really excited about this.
Awesome. Yeah, I've just been consuming episodes of both your podcasts, and it's kind of a cool mix. You got the business side, personal success. You have some really interesting people on that side, and then the MMA side, where you kind of get the up and comers and you get to see who's on the rise. And I'm just curious, how did you decide to get into those types of podcasts? What was it that drew you into those ideas? And I'm also curious just about the common threads, because just listening to 6 or 7 episodes of each, you could hear so many common threads between those up and coming MMA fighters and those really successful entrepreneurs or successful whatever they are. There's a lot of common threads there.
Yeah, I've always been interested in entrepreneurship, right? I started mowing yards at 10 years old and had the same clients for 2 years in a row. Mm-hmm. And I was, literally pushing out, this sounds like a really old guy, but I literally pushed a mower like a mile one direction to get to one of my clients for $15, and then I turn around and walk it back. But so I've always kind of been in entrepreneurship. I've also really been a huge fan of combat sports since early on. My dad had Mike Tyson pay-per-views. I remember being in 1st and 2nd grade, my cousin and I would rent on VHS, the UFCs 1 and 2 and 3, and watch those at a really early age. I think I was a ninja for Halloween for like 15 years straight. Right.
Yeah.
And so in 2012, that's when I actually started Top Rated MMA. It was actually just an apparel company when we launched. Oh, really? And we kind of came out and we said, how do we make this thing different? So my wife came up with the name Top Rated MMA. And then we also decided we were going to do 100% American made MMA apparel. And so that's what we ended up doing for the first couple of years. Mm-hmm. And then in 2015, I got bored with it, man. I actually put it up for sale. I put an ad on Craigslist and said, who wants to buy this brand name? And the Twitter followers and all this stuff, it was like a few grand. And this guy called me up at the end of 2015 and said, hey man, I'll buy it. And we started talking in that conversation. I was like, nah, man, I can't give up.
Yeah.
So I rebranded, got a new website, new logo, and we launched the Top Rated MMA podcast there in 2017. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew that like I wanted to go talk with fighters. I'm infatuated with people's stories, right? So I want to understand like why do they want to get into a cage to get punched in the face? And that kind of ties into the entrepreneurship, right? Because entrepreneurs, we get punched in the face as well with all the no's and rejections and things like that. Hopefully not physically, but we tend to go through those same ups and downs. And so I was really kind of, inspired to start what originally started as the Bearded Biz Show. Now it's called the Erik Allen Show. Just so I could talk with entrepreneurs and hear their stories of comebacks and struggles and failures and how they got to it. And I see a lot of like MMA fighters that like that side of my other podcast. Yeah. And then there's some people that are on my other podcast that like MMA, but not so much. But I think there's more of a crossover from the MMA side to the entrepreneur side.
And it's funny that MMA is such a niche thing. As I get further into it, I was very, very much a casual fan till about 2015. That's why I loved it. But growing up, my parents didn't like MMA. They didn't like, just the whole order around it really prevented me from diving into it. But then when I graduated and I could pay for the cards myself and kind of learn the stories, and also being such a podcast addict, finding guys like Ariel Helwani and Luke Thomas and Brendan Schaub that really dug in and showed the story behind these fighters. It's such a beautiful art and such a beautiful sport, and just what the brush it gets painted with all the time is so far away from what the reality of what it is. And it's it's unfortunate when you say there's a lot of crossover fans from the MMA show that likes kind of the entrepreneurial show, but not as much the other way. I feel like that is very much going to be something that we experience for this next 10 years, because I feel like it's just that breaking into the mainstream. I feel like there's so much behind what MMA is that eventually it's going to become, it's already, you see it happening, right? There was just a show on ABC or NBC or whatever that was in the States, which is a huge deal for the sport. And I feel like, we're going to see some really cool stuff in the next 10 or 15 years as it becomes more accepted and people start to see the beauty behind the sport and these stories, because you want to talk sport and story, right? Like those two go together like peanut butter and jelly, and no sport has stories like MMA does. Like every fighter and every LFA, UFC, Bellator, everyone has a story and they're all amazing. And it's just about finding new ways to tell those and to bring people in and get them past that first, initial pushback they have to dive into these stories and see who these people are, which is amazing what you do with your show. It's not just, the John Joneses and the Israel Adesanya's of the world that you're hearing about. It's these up and comers that are hungry and hearing from them. And I just found so much from that. And I'm kind of curious. So many of the shows that I listen to are with more established fighters. What do you think and I'm sure being a fan of the sport, you hear those as well. What do you think sets it apart hearing these younger fighters? What sort of different, things do you find you learn for yourself interviewing these types of guys versus maybe those guys that have been around the block and have done this all the time?
I've had people on my show that have had one fight, and I've had people on my show that have had a lot of fights. And I think the common thread that I see amongst the fighters, male and female, that are really serious about it, right? They're dedicated. They're committed to the sport. They're waking up early. They're doing 2 and 3 workouts a day, but they're also working a full-time job. Right. Or these guys who are like on the pro UFC cards and Bellator cards and stuff like that. That's their full-time job. That's great. But I had a passion to really get to know these guys who are in that struggle, in the up and coming. And so I really target or really try to find those up and coming amateur fighters that are serious about being in the sport. They have established a social media presence and they're continuing to build on that. And then, from a global presence, like I am talking with fighters all over the world, which I've been blessed to do. And this weekend, episode 217 rolls out, man. So, wow. Been able to blessed to speak with over 200 fighters, and it's been awesome. But I think that common theme that you see is these guys are just hungry to be successful, and they love the sport of MMA. And it's not, they don't consider it a job. It's like, that's what they're born to do. And they're going to do whatever it takes to get into that cage and make that a full-time living so they can support their family.
Right. And I feel like that's also, that common thread is so much applicable to the entrepreneur side, right? Those are the ones, the successful entrepreneurs are those guys that have that hunger, right? The same things you say about one is so applicable to the other, right? For people that understand both sides, maybe somebody that, has put their toes in both of those ponds, they know how similar they are. And I feel like it maybe be surprising for people, maybe not, but I feel like maybe people that don't have as much of an idea of what it is, that might be surprising to them. I'm also curious, you talk about actively searching out those younger fighters that have that drive. one of the things with me starting this podcast is just trying to find anyone. MMA is clearly one of those areas where I'd love to interview more guys. And I've been, there's a couple local Alberta fighters that I've been in the works to get them on and have them. But I found it quite difficult to reach out to these guys and to find them. How did you get started with that? Were you already really ingrained in the community to have guys that kind of were that launching pad, and then, one guy told another guy, or is it still as hard as the first day where you're grinding to get these guys on?
It is tough, but I will say this, what helped me was 2 years ago, I didn't do it I'm not doing it in 2021, but I did it in 2019. I did it in 2020. I did a fighter shout out of the day every single day for 2 years.
Wow.
Every single day I announced a different fighter. And I said, hey, here's their Twitter, here's their link, Instagram, and here's their Facebook. Go check them out. And probably half of them didn't even know who I was.
Yeah.
But what I did was I went to tapology.com and I would seek through all the top rankings of all the regions across the US. And I had them in this Excel doc.
Yeah.
And then I had this random name generator that I literally on Sunday mornings, I would take an hour and a half and I would schedule my posts for the week, and I would randomly generate, a name for each day. I'd grab a photo off their Instagram and throw it on there. And so that helped me kind of see these fighters, like, where were they ranking? Are they being serious? Are they fighting a lot? And then obviously 2020, there wasn't a lot of MMA fights until the end of the year. But yeah, that's how I got, and then that's how I got those lists. And what I would do, and this is how I book 99% of my guests for Top Rated MMA and my Erik Allen show, is I literally pull out my phone. I do a 30-second personal video. Now, most of the time for Top Rated MMA, I do that. Not all the time for my Top Rated MMA guests, because it's a little bit easier where I can just shoot them a text. But on my Erik Allen show, I literally pull out this video. I'm like, hey, it's Erik Allen. I'm the host of Top Rated MMA and the Erik Allen show. I love what you got going on, man. I think my listeners would enjoy hearing your story. Yeah. Let's connect and let's have you on the show. And I don't go over 30 seconds and I zip that over to them.
Oh, that is, those two ideas are absolutely great. I'm just, when you hear those good ideas that you're just almost giving yourself a pass kick in the ass for not thinking of those yourself. Sure. That's what I'm doing right now. Cause that's genius. That's so smart. And I'm sure, those up and coming fighters, that's all they want, right? That's their dream. And it's unfortunate. It's funny to me to watch MMA because it's such a meritocracy once you're in the cage. But once you're outside of the cage, it's so much politics, and it's almost the farthest thing from it. And you can see these fighters are so frustrated by that because they're told that if you trust the process and you keep training and you grind hard and you don't turn down a fight, keep going, you will eventually get to where you want to go. But there's so much else that goes into it that they're also desperate to gain a name and get a name out there. And some guys that is so not part of who they are forced into it to, sell themselves when they just want to let their skills show for themselves. And it's an odd dynamic. And it's something that I think is also part of the reason is that it is a newer sport and they're still kind of figuring that thing out, but it's something you don't really see in any other sports. And I mean, maybe the only one you could compare it to is maybe boxing, but it has such a rich history of so many tracks and you just kind of got to know the right people. Where MMA, it's still kind of up in the air. And, 5 years ago, the key people you needed to know to progress forward are probably a lot different than what it is now. Right. And you could do that 5 years before. So it's just, I can't imagine being that up and coming fighter where so much of that is up in the air and you're just trying to trust this process. It'd be so mentally tough, right? Like and these are the most mentally tough people in the world, or some of the most mentally tough people in the world. So it doesn't surprise me all that much, but man, I just, I feel so much. I feel like the more I get into the sport, the more I feel for these guys, right? One of the things I was listening to on one of your episodes was them talking about losses and it's not the pain. It's not the injury. It's none of that. It's them working so hard for their team and they feel like they let people down. And the more I hear that from people, I get so nervous when I watch people fight, right? Like when like someone like Sugar Sean that I love to the moon and back, like my hands are sweating. I'm pouring, I'm pacing around the house because you're so invested with these guys, right? You just don't, you don't want to see them fail. And, and just all that heartbreak that's going to come with it. I've always been a sports guy. I love sports, but I've never been head over heels into it like this where it allows you to. And I feel like, what do you think that is about MMA that kind of allows for that, maybe compared to, I don't know how much you're into any other sports, but what do you think sets MMA apart that allows for that degree of, I don't know, whatever it is?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the personal connection that a lot of them have, right? Yeah. So the people that come on my show or that I invite onto the Top Rated MMA show, they have a social media presence. There's a lot of fighters out there that are killer in the cage, but they suck at social media. And I'm sorry, but I'm not going to have them on my show because one, they're not going to help me, but two, like they don't have a story to share, right? I can't share their story out with the public if they don't have something. I can't redirect people to them. Right. And so I think what makes that stand out, between MMA fighters and other sports, is they do have this personal connection. They are like physically getting beat up for their job or attempting to get to that full-time job, right? Where you got like basketball players who get like kicked in the shin on accident and then they cry and they hauled off the cage or hauled off the court, right? I mean, like they're making a lot of money to play on a basketball court and they like hurt their pinky and then they got to whine and cry and get off the court. You got MMA fighters that are bleeding off their face, that are punching each other bare knuckle boxing, right? And these guys are tough as nails, man. And so I think like men and women, I think we can just see that and we're like, man, these dudes are warriors, man. And so I think that's what makes that personal connection, I think, with MMA fighters versus other sports.
Right. And it seems like so much of it is authenticity. And that's another one where I saw that thread come up a lot with your guests on both shows, right? That how much of, with fighting, it's a little different because like we said, once you get in the cage, the authenticity thing kind of goes out the window and it's just you and your training up until that point up against that person that's across from you. Right. And it all for that 15 or 25 minutes, that's all that matters. But outside of it, that's what's going to put you from, a Sugar Sean versus, somebody else that's, I'm trying to think of an example, somebody that's maybe a little bit less outspoken like that, but it's that authenticity that you can tap into. And I feel like for entrepreneurs, that's what's going to help. That's what's going to get you investing. That's what's going to get you the right people around you. That's what's going to get you all these things. And I feel like that authenticity is what, to me, makes podcasts so special and what I fell in love with podcasts, 5 or 6 years ago and have done, ever since. I've barely watched TV or anything other than sports. That's all I listen to is just podcasts, because it's that authenticity. You see that. And I feel like once you see it somewhere, you can see it in all these avenues of, what that is. And something I'm curious about to ask you, this is one of the questions I wanted to ask you about, was when you decided to start doing these shows, when you decided on length of show, that was something that I was curious to ask you about, just kind of how you landed there. And I think I'll tie it into this authenticity thing because it comes out very authentic on your show that these are things that you care about and that you love and you have a lot of experience with them. But I found that, and I only listened to maybe 10, 12 episodes of your shows together, but I felt like I was always itching for more of you because you're so good at hosting and you're so good at setting these guys up and telling their stories. Do you think about that and about letting more of your own personal authenticity come through in somewhere more long form where you're less dependent, or not dependent, but less focusing on making the guests look good and telling their story?
Yeah, I think what happened was when I started the show, I used to not have a time limit, and I still don't, and I'll let it roll if there's good conversation going. And I most of my shows, which you've probably seen on the Top Rated MMA show, they're going to range somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes. Yeah. And then the entrepreneur side, I really try to go no more than 30 minutes on those.
They're busy guys.
Everybody's busy, but for me, when I listen to podcasts, after about 30 minutes, I kind of lose interest unless it's something that's really hooked me in, which is not very often. So I wanted to start a podcast with the time length that I would personally like to have going. Right. And so I think in the short amount of time, I try to get out their story. You can see in every episode, I ask the same question because I want people to relate with them. Right. So I ask them like, hey, where'd you grow up? What's childhood like? Yeah. Because a lot of times people they go, oh crap, man, they're just fighters. They just got there. But they don't realize like they might've went through struggles. They might not have had a good childhood. Maybe they've gotten through that. They've overcome some stuff to get to where they're at, or maybe they had this perfect childhood and they had these awesome people in their lives and stuff like that. And they're both situations are going to relate to different people. But yeah, I think the time frame itself, that for me, I wanted to stick that, and I'll go 30 minutes on an MMA show if the storyline is continuing, like we're jamming really well. But I like to get down to business with it. Like, I don't like to, I want to BS around. Like we have some pre-talk before we kick the recording on. Right. So I kind of have that established relationship with them, but then we get in and I want to, it's my show. Like I said, it's all about highlighting them. I want to get them known. Right. And I want to get their name out there. Most of the people on my shows, they're not very well known. Some of them are, but not extremely. And so I want to help them get their name out there. And I, having said that, I love that answer because I do think that's exactly what I was hoping you'd say, is that's what's authentic to you. And I feel like that's what comes through, because I feel like for myself, when I would listen as a listener, I love the long ones. I love when people go deep and really go past the first couple of layers. And I usually found that, after an hour, that was when I really hooked in and really, now I've heard a little bit from this person and kind of how their mind works and how they
all that type of thing. But with your episodes, even though they're shorter, I wasn't thinking that way. I was like, oh man, I love the questions that you ask. I love that they were the same every time. So you can kind of get that, a little bit about what's coming. And I found you found a very good way of getting a lot out of a guest in a short amount of time, right? Like there's no downtime, there's no boring moments. It's always action packed, which is really good, especially if you're talking about like an MMA show. Usually guys like action, right? And they wanted to bring that in. So I'm really, really happy to hear that. I had another question in there. I got so rambly on my speech. Oh yeah, that was actually something I was thinking about, hearing those questions come up. I kind of wanted to maybe throw in my own questions, but kind of ask the same ones of you. So I'm curious, how was growing up, and how was, with my show, I like to take things back. So how was things at growing up in childhood with you?
Dude, I had an interesting childhood. That's for sure, man. It started out like, normal childhood for me. Like we played Little League. We went to Sunday school, and my dad would take me and my best friend Dave and literally throw us in dumpsters behind big stores and say, go find treasure. Right. Like that's what we did. And then my parents got divorced when I was 11.
Right.
My mom got together with a boyfriend right away that was extremely abusive. So he was an alcoholic, and he used to beat the snot out of her. And then when I was, in the middle of my 8th grade year, they moved us to Montana. They moved to this house that had 3 bedrooms. It was one for them, one for my sister, and one for my stepbrother that they had together. And they said, Erik, you got to live out in the garage. So I literally was out in this garage. I had a plastic sheet at the end of my bed that on the other side of that was the truck. And I had a fireplace in there. And during the winter of Montana, in the garage, it gets pretty dang cold. So, that's where I lived. And then when I was 13 years old, I'm brushing my teeth. It's like midnight, and they came home arguing, no big deal. But something in my heart was like, man, you got to turn around. And so the way the house was set up was behind me was the kitchen to the pantry to the garage where my room was at. And so I turned around the corner, and I see him on top of my mom just going boom, 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 one shot after another, just punch her in the face. I'm like, man, I got to get this guy off her. And so I snuck up behind him. I grabbed one of those cast iron pans you take camping with you. Yeah. And I just swung as hard as I could, and I split the back of his head open. And he turned around. He was like, what the? And as he said that, I took another swing and split his forehead open. Lots of blood coming out. Still didn't knock him out somehow. And I remember I'd fallen over at that swing, and he was standing over yelling at me, and my mom like jumps up and starts like punching him in the face, like blood splatting on the wall. Cops come finally, take him to jail for the night. My mom doesn't press charges. I basically got kicked out of the house at that point. And so I went back to live with my dad in Washington State, and he would put $20 in a cup for my lunch money and then fill the freezer with Hunger Man meals. And that was like basically how I lived. And then I had no accountability and no one to teach me about money, anything like that. So I got addicted to drugs very early on. I was 18 years old, and I got arrested for having a bong. 21 years old, I was $28,000 in debt and had to file bankruptcy. And then continued to live this destructive lifestyle as I moved into the music business. I worked for Universal Records for a couple of years, and over a 2-year span, probably 175 concerts and open tab, and lived this rock star lifestyle without actually being a rock star. I don't know how to play any instruments, but man. And then in 2004, I decided to make a change, and I got sober, and my life has been amazing ever since. And that's the year that I met my wife, and our life is awesome. We decided early on that we weren't going to bring abuse, addiction, and divorce into this, our life. We have 2 awesome kids. Both of us come from broken families, and we said we're not bringing that to our kids. And so we're on a track to leave a different legacy for our kids.
And that's so amazing. I love hearing stories like that of someone where you can see very clearly that there's 2 paths ahead of you, right? You could have gone down a very different route, and to take that and to use it as fuel and to find what you don't want and to establish those goals. And that's just so awesome to hear. It makes me just happy inside to hear that when anybody has a story like that.
Thanks.
Hearing a couple things you had mentioned on the podcast, it sounds like you're a very disciplined guy now. I heard you mention you get up at 4 a.m. during the week. That blows my mind. I'm curious, where does that discipline come from in your estimation? Where do you think you picked that up along the way? I mean, it sounds like you had so much going through as a kid in so many different stages and so many different areas of your life. Whereabouts do you think you picked up that kind of discipline?
Well, I used to sleep in a lot. And then when in my early 20s, I got a job at Starbucks, never even drank coffee until I got a job there. And they're like, hey, you're hired, but you have to open the store at 4 a.m. So I had to get up at 3:30 to get to work at 4 a.m. And I wasn't really focused on entrepreneurship at the time. I was kind of just like living life. Right. Yeah. And now I think it's shifted. I do wake up at 4 a.m. 6 days a week. I don't set the alarm on Sunday, but I'm usually up by about 5. But here's the thing is my desire to be successful is bigger than my desire to sleep. So I get up at 4:00 and I work on my podcast. I work on engaging with guests, work on my website, work on the courses I'm putting together, things like that. And then I still work a full-time job. So at 8:00, I flip over to this computer and I start working my full-time job. And then at 5:00, it's family time. So I get up early because then I can focus on me and my stuff while my family sleeps, and I don't have to eat into that family time before I work on my full-time job.
And it's that's another common thread I'm sure we could talk about for hours here, is that what a family does. And that's something that for me, a younger guy, the things I'm doing now is try and set up, because I want to have kids, I want to have a family. That is a big thing that's very important to me. And just in the last couple of years, I've realized that, and now that's changed how I operate, because now that is a goal that I have in mind. And not only do I want success for myself, but I want to be set up and I want to be really happy with what I'm doing, right? Like I have a full-time job and I do this, and it's good, but I want to be set up where I am extremely happy going into work every day, whatever that work turns out to be. If it's this work or my other work, I want to be able to find a place where I'm always going to be that happy person, where I'm not coming home after a day and, I'm always going to be physically there. I don't have any worries about that, but I want to be mentally there, and I want to be set up in a time in my life where I can be the happy person, because I love myself when I'm happy. But, everybody has this. There's certain stresses that can be and certain things that can happen in life where it makes you not your best self. And I feel like that is something that changed in me, is just, what can I do to make sure that I'm my best self the most amount of time, for that specific reason of I want to be there for a child and I want to create a life. Because now that I have a couple of years under my belt, I look back at what my family and the people around me, my small community in Northern Alberta, did for me growing up. And I want to be able to bring that forward. And I see that so much in fighters when they have their first kid, how much that changes them, how much their discipline changes, so much of that. And it's so curious to me. I wonder, you've interviewed so many fighters and entrepreneurs over the years. What is your experience with that? And maybe how aware of that change were you before you had your own kids, versus how surprised were you when you had the kids and you felt that instinct kicked in, if you did feel that instinct?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think once I had a child, it wasn't about me anymore, right? It was about making sure that they are set up for life and protecting them, and I think fighters have the same thing. I hear all the time when I have up and coming fighters, or I have, older fighters, like Ken Shamrock has been on my show twice. Right. And so I've been able to speak to everyone from the local guys on up to the bigger names. And you hear that in them when they're like, when I say, hey, what's your proudest moment? Like, I like to get deep dive with the fighters and the people that I talk to and talk about mindset and things like that. And 9 out of 10 times, man, I'm proud that my son was born and my daughter was born. I'm proud that I got married. Like, it's all about the family. It's not about the MMA stuff, man. That's what really matters, right? It's their family. And for me, it's the same thing, man. It's, my kids are my world. My wife is my world. And so, if I didn't have them, I wouldn't be doing this, and so they're definitely the driving factor. And I tell my wife all the time, look, I'm going to keep doing this until I have that property where I can pee off the front porch and neighbors can't say anything because I can't see them. Right. Yeah. Like, I want that property, so big a property that neighbors can't even see me when I'm peeing off at the front porch.
That's a perfect goal right there. It helps you. It helps the family. It's perfect. And another question that I hear you ask people about a lot is about their musical taste. And it seems like just from hearing you ask the question, it seems like it's a very meaningful question to you. And I'm just wondering, maybe also to mimic that question back to you, of what types of music are you into? But then also I'm curious, what does music mean to you? Because you also worked in the music industry. You said you lived that rock star life. So I'm curious, where does music factor into your life with all these other very important factors like family and the podcast and work and all that?
It's huge, man. I grew up at my grandma raised me. Like, I was at her house all the time since very early age, 2 and 3 years old. And it was actually the house my dad grew up in. But I remember while I'd be there, I'd be down in the basement and I would put Elvis 8 tracks into the player and listen. And so my grandma loved Elvis. So I started at a very early age for me, man. Always loved Elvis as a kid, still love Elvis music to this day. And, my dad was always into music. He took me to see Richard Marx for my first concert. And then I saw Rod Stewart for my 13th birthday.
Cool.
And then, when I got into see, when I landed my job with Universal Records, I was already managing a band for a year. So we're kind of doing this, mini tour, right? But then being with Universal Records, I was at a concert 2 to 3 nights a week and hanging out backstage with these bands. So I got to meet a ton of just amazing people. And some of them were jackasses, but most of them were really cool people. And I think for me, music is life. Like I hate silence, right? Like I can't
Me
sit
too.
in the room
Yeah.
and like just have nothing going. So,
Mhm.
I grew up probably more into the rock. So all through
Mhm.
high school, I was very much into the metal, like Korn, probably one of my favorite bands,
Mhm.
Bush, those guys, like those were my big influencers in high
Yeah.
school. And then when I worked for Universal, I went into that being this metalhead guy. But
Yeah.
they're like, guess what? You have to listen to other music because you have to track
Yeah.
this other stuff. And
Mhm.
right. So it
Mhm.
kind of opened my eyes to other genres of music, to
Yeah.
country, to hip hop and things like that. And so I'm pretty much all over the place, but my heart is really on that rock side of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
That would have been my guess.
Yeah. So, but that's where I'm at. I mean, I lost track of the number of concerts I've been to in my life,
Mhm.
but probably over 300 combined,
Wow.
since, it's amazing. Like for me, just music is life. I miss live concerts so much,
Oh,
I can't
yeah.
wait to get back
Yeah.
and
Me
have things
too.
open back up again.
Oh man, I think we're all thinking that. I just had one of the coolest opportunities I've had at the podcast. I'm sure you can relate to this, but the podcast is amazing. I enjoy getting to interview people, but every once in a while you get a certain person on that may not, numbers wise or anything, but personally, right? I had a couple authors that meant a lot to me, and then just the other week I had John Morgan from MMA Junkie on and got to talk with him for an hour. And
Nice.
like I don't think I'm not excited for the numbers it's going to do or a big name, but just to be able to interview someone like that was so cool for me, right? Like it just you see him on TV, you see him at every press conference, right? He asks the best questions, and then you get to actually sit down for an hour, and he's a cool guy, and you get to ask those questions. And I just found that after I just released episode 50 this week, which is a big accomplishment, right?
For sure.
And I
Congrats,
found,
man.
thank you, I appreciate that, and I just found that looking back on those first 50 episodes, that was the biggest thing to me, was the interviews with those authors and with John Morgan, just getting to sit down, even if, God forbid I lost the footage and I didn't get to release those episodes. It was so meaningful to me.
Yep.
Do you have any episodes in your, hundreds of episodes that you've done? We're on a little bit different of a scale here, but
Sure.
which ones of those were, had a hint of that for you?
Man, there's a few of them.
Yeah, I bet.
The very first CD that I ever owned was a band called Arrested Development. They sang the song Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
And Speech from that band, probably like I memorized that whole CD, man. I listened to that thing forever. It was the very first CD I owned. And I came across him on Instagram when I started my podcast, and I reached out to him. I'm like, hey, dude, I'd love to have him on my show. And he was like, heck yeah. So I got to have a phone call with him, or he was on my show. And for me to talk to Speech, man, to talk about the band and what he's got going on right now, that was like, I was almost like starstruck for me to like talk with that guy. Right. I think the other guy is Ed Milet.
Yeah.
Ed Milet changed my life. Right. 2018, I came across Ed Milet online and I was like hooked. I was like, whoa, like mind blown, binge watching everything he had put out. And it was kind of that reason, or the reason I started my other podcast was because of Ed. He fired me up to really go, all right, man, let's get this other thing going. Yeah. And so at the end of 2018, he issued to his 1 million followers on Instagram, send me a 1-minute story of what you're passionate about, what drives you to success. Yeah. So I submitted a 1-minute story to him. And I actually won. I won the Ed Milet Max Out Challenge out of his however many people submitted. And so I got to sit down with him on a Zoom call for 20 minutes. We ended up talking for 30, talked with his team. I was able to record it and then release that as an early episode of one of my shows. And I think that opened up so many doors. His book is called Max Out. It's probably one of the greatest books I've ever read. It's 95 pages. You can read it in one sitting. And you can get it for free if you just Google Ed Milet Max Out Challenge book or Max Out book. And you might pay shipping for $9 or something like that. But Ed Milet, Speech, I think Ken Shamrock, those three guys, like, I've been, talk with like Tim Story, Bedros Keuilian, Brad Lee, Ryan Stewman, like Eric LeGrand, Jim the Rookie Morris from the movie The Rookie was based off of, right? Yeah. Like all those guys, like I get on the calls with them, I'm like blown away. I'm like, how am I able to do what I'm doing right now? Because these guys are way above my level, but they're super real and just having a great conversation with me. And so those are like those moments where I'm like, man, I'll never forget these moments.
Yeah. Almost doesn't even feel real while you're doing it. Hey, it's like this I'm going to wake up in about 10 minutes and this will all be a dream, right? Like it's just next level. Hey.
Dude, I interviewed Ken Shamrock, and then an hour later, I interviewed Ed Milet. So on the same day, I had an interview with both those guys. So I'm like, holy crap, what's going on? You know,
how did you sleep that night? I found myself after an interview like that, I am buzzing around the house like I look like I did crack or something. I'm just crazy, bouncing off walls and just it's quite the experience. But that's the thing. I feel like so many people see podcasts and see dollar signs like, oh, this is a new industry, I can get into this. And they jump in without that true love for it and that reason. And they don't understand why it doesn't do well or why they're not getting out of it what other people seem to get out of it. But if you can get out of it just those couple days, every couple months where you get those amazing experiences where, it makes everything worth it up until then, like people just don't understand that. And I feel like that is, or some people don't understand. I feel like that's where everyone always throws those numbers at. I definitely heard them when I told people I was starting a podcast, right? Like, oh, do you know how many % of it fail and all this stuff, right? And it's like, yeah, that makes sense because a lot of people get into it for the wrong reasons. But I feel like I don't even understand, and maybe I don't know if you'll feel this as well. But when people talk about like, oh, are you going to keep doing quitting this was never even an option in my head. It never has been. It hasn't come up yet.
Yeah.
Obviously I've only been 50 episodes in and I have a long way to go, but at no point in it was it ever even on the table to not do this because of how much I enjoy it. And I feel like that's what people don't understand. Like when they ask like, oh, are you making any money off? It's like, I don't even care. Like that is so miles away from what I'm concentrating on right now. And what is meaningful to it. Just, maybe if you felt that at any point, how did you deal with that? Cause I feel like that's sometimes not frustrating for me, but it's hard to make people understand that. And people are always so, the only framework they understand things through is, how much money is it making or how many views does it have? That's kind of the only thing they can understand with it. So how do you explain your passion for these types of things to people without, those traditional frameworks of dollars or view counts?
Yeah. I mean, I think I came across a statistic. I don't know how you saying that word wrong, but like, essentially 80% of podcasts never make it to episode 100. And so when I started the podcast, like I never had an option or plan B. There was no quit in my mind. And I've never monetized it really. Like I didn't do it for the money. I did it because I was interested genuinely into the people that I had on my show. Like I want to get to know this person. And I almost felt like selfish, talking to these guests. I'm like, man, this is an awesome conversation. I got to share this with people. That's like why I do the podcast, because one, I want to share their stories, but also I love having one-on-one conversations with guys, like Ed and, Dr. Greg Reed, who wrote the book 3 Feet from Gold and stuff like that. Like after the show, I get a personal relationship with these guys. Yeah. And one of the things that I do especially with guys that are on my Erik Allen show that are in the entrepreneur space, is about once a quarter, I take maybe the top 20% of the guests that have come on my show, and I actually shoot them an Instagram video every 3 or 4 months. And I'm just checking in. Hey, what's going on, man? It's Erik. Thank you again for coming to my show. I hope you're doing awesome. Hey, great job on this project, whatever they happen to be doing. And then I'm like, I'm just praying blessings over you and your family and your business. And if there's anything that I can do for you, just let me know. Thanks. And then I just leave it at that. I never ask for anything. And then you get guys like Bedros Quinn. He just sends me a voicemail back. Erik, thanks for the video, man. That was awesome, dude. If there's anything that I can do for you, you let me know. And I'm like, whoa, that just opened the door, right? Oh, that's awesome. I love that idea. And that is something else I wanted to ask you about. Something that I found, like I said, when I found podcasts, I had recently graduated university. I was pretty disenfranchised with that whole process of what university was, what it was sold to me as before going into it, to what it actually was when I got there. And it just wasn't the same. And I was like, man, I feel like I didn't learn anything. I feel like I had to really, corrupt what I stood for in order to get through it. Right. And just, I know what they want to hear. Even though I don't feel this and I vehemently disagree with a lot of this stuff I'm spewing, this is what I need to do to get through these classes or they fail me. Right. And I feel like I was coming out of that. And then I found podcasts. I was like, oh my God, there's people with no control, no producers telling them what to do. They're just teaching and trying to show people what they value, right? And sometimes that's done very purposely. Sometimes it's accidental, like Joe Rogan, where he didn't start it trying to teach people anything. He just wanted to, smoke some weed with his buddies in the green rooms of comedy shows, right? Like that's what it started as, but he just followed what he was passionate about and what interested him. And then people learned from that, right? And I just feel like I was finding so much and I was learning so much about myself through it, and finding these podcasts that would really suck me in, right? Like it started with Joe Rogan, and then I found a bunch of other podcasters, and Lex Friedman and these Weinstein brothers and all these people. But I found that the common thread throughout
all of these people that I really like, they all have a message of love, and some are religious, some aren't, but all through the same undercurrent of what that is, that real universal love and compassion for people and wanting to help people. That was a running thread of all the ones that I love. And I feel like it's almost innate to the podcasting space. And maybe, like we said, there's some people that get into it for the wrong reasons, and maybe those aren't the people that don't have that underneath. But it seems like it's such a running thread through so much of it in the podcast space. And then on your episodes, I see that is something that is very important to you. And I'm wondering if that was something that trying to figure out a way to frame this into a question instead of just talking at you. I'm wondering if you think that's more of a key to being successful is having that, and now you're seeing it on these people that you have on, or do you think that's more of a factor of that is something that you value, so you're bringing on guests that also value that, or do you think that is just a key component to being successful is having that?
Yeah, I think that, it is a key point to be successful, right? You have to love on people.
Yeah.
For me personally, I'm a Christian. I love the Lord, and I'm a Christ follower. But here's the thing. I hate people who are judgmental.
Yeah.
One thing that I get, Christians get this bad rap for being judgmental, but I want to change that. I want to talk to anybody and everybody out there. My job is not to judge anybody. I don't care what your sexual preference is, political preference, whatever, if you wear a mask or not. That's not my job to judge you. My job is just to love on you where you're at.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when I get people on my show, I want to understand, man, where are they at? Where are they going? And I'm genuinely proud of these people when they tell me, man, I got through this, I got through that, or I made it through this life, and man, I'm doing successful. I'm doing awesome. I love hearing those success stories. And, I think podcasters in general, the successful podcasters like Joe Rogan. I mean, you can listen to a motivational speech from Joe Rogan in almost every episode where he's just talking about, man, quit judging people, do you, and be focusing on your mind and things like that. So I think those successful podcasters, we do have that common theme of man, just love on people. And I have this thing on my wall here that says constant and never ending improvement. Always. So that's something that I see every single day. And I think that if we can improve in any area of our life throughout the day at any point, and there's so many areas that we can learn from, I think if we can just all focus on that, man, the world will be such a better place.
Exactly. And it's so simple. It's almost frustrating that more people don't see the importance of that, right? Because it's so simple to just, and that's something that I found it's not something you learn through podcasts, but I feel because it's so cliche that everybody knows that, you learn that in grade 3, grade 2, the golden rule, do unto others like you do on yourself. But there's a real difference in hearing it all the time and really taking it in and having it impact you. And I feel like hearing it on podcasts, you hear these two people that you highly look up to talk for 2 hours and they end it with something like that. You're going to be listening. It's going to impact you a lot more than just, in between periods of a hockey game, you see a commercial telling people to be good. That doesn't impact you. That doesn't, hit you on the inside. But I feel like with this medium that allows us to go, past those surface levels and, pull people in so that they're actually listening, they're actually engaged. And then to bring that kind of messaging forward, it's so much more impact. It was personally impactful for me, way more, because I'd heard so many of these messages, right? Guys like Ed Milet telling you about going after it and getting after it and what it's going to take. Hearing that, or reading it in a book somewhere when you're not really engaged with it is so different from whatever it is that podcasting is tapping into. And I feel like that was so special in my life. And that's why I'm so excited to bring it to other people. That's one thing I've talked about, when people ask me what my goals are with it. It's right now, my goal is to become one of those people like Joe Rogan, like Lex Friedman, where I can do for people what they did for me. But until then, I want to at least build up enough trust with people where when I talk about people like Joe Rogan, like Lex Friedman, like these people that had huge impacts on me, and sending them their way, because obviously 50 episodes in, I'm not going to compare to a Joe Rogan that's, 2000 episodes in, but if I can, show you the way and get you onto that. Now I've done good. I've brought you to something that has helped me in the past. And then eventually I'll get better and I'll get better. And maybe I'll end up being that for people. And I feel like that is so much about what I'm at is, just trying to do the best I can and try and push people to people that may be ahead of the road on the same path that I'm on, but just up ahead. And you're going to get more from this guy. Go listen to him and I'll catch up, right? I'll get there. I have full confidence that I'm going to be there too one day. It's just, I'm going to do the best I can now. And if it really talks to you, great. If not, I'm going to give you, four podcasts and for one of my podcasts that you can go check out on your own. That might be even better, or might be that person that speaks to you, because it might not even be think of maybe you're not there yet. Maybe you're just not that person, right? Maybe a Joe Rogan is going to speak to somebody just like, Ken Shamrock might as a guest on one episode. It's about finding that person that's going to connect with you and allow you to open up and have these teachings come in and impact you. Right. And I feel like that's so special. And what I'm excited about doing further on the podcast, and maybe a question I can ask you is, what kind of podcasts were you listening before you jumped into it yourself of doing podcasts? What kind of podcasts were you listening to, and where were your inspirations maybe beforehand?
Bro, I never listened to podcasts before.
Really? Wow.
Never,
that's the first time I've heard that. That's awesome.
I never did, man. I never even downloaded the freaking app on my phone, dude.
Yeah.
Here's the thing is I watched YouTube videos. So I would watch motivational speeches and talks, right, from Ed or Tony Robbins. I'm a huge fan of Tony Robbins, man, and what he's done. And so for me, that's what I did, man. I just listened to people that were releasing YouTube shows, but I never even listened to any podcasts until I started my own.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So then maybe my question is, once you started podcasting, you got into it, who did you dive into? Who did you find after that, once you were inside the space that you enjoyed? Because I think there are guys that walk both lines. They do the motivational stuff on YouTube, but they found podcasting as another space to bring their message forward. So I'm sure some of those same people now probably found their podcast and like those as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, Ed Milet, his podcast, Tony Robbins, Lewis Howes, I jump onto a bunch of live recordings with like Dr. Greg Reed.
Right.
And I'll jump into any entrepreneur or type podcast. That's what fires me up. I love getting motivated, from other shows and hearing those stories. Right. And so I've had a lot of great guests that have their own shows on as well. Zach Babcock, man, his story is unbelievable.
Yeah.
He's been on my show, and Mike Young, also amazing story. He's been on my show as well. Like those type of podcasts fire me up. Those underdog type shows. Yeah. And I say underdog because Zach's show is called Underdog Empowerment, but it's legit like an amazing story that he has. And those type of shows is what draws me in. Right.
Hearing that type of lineup that you just spoke to me, right? Like heavy hitters, right? And that is a change your life starter pack right there of people that can. And something for me that I often walk the line. I always appreciate those guys. I love Tony Robbins. But I've never been the kind of guy to sit down and listen to them I'll usually get a piece of them if they're guests on other places that I like them, right? You might catch them being guests other places, but something that always prevented me from jumping in whole hog on a lot of those personal development type shows, even if the person is the ability for their, I'm trying to find the right way to word this because I don't mean it in a poor way. And I don't think anybody that you listed does this, but there's so much power in that motivational type speaking. And I feel like there's times where you see it co-opted. They take the same messaging that an Ed Milet or a Tony Robbins is speaking, package it to something else, and use the power of that to maybe sell something else. You see a lot of pyramid schemes, multi-level marketing schemes, taking those principles that you see, and for guys that have looked into it a little bit, you can see what they're doing, and you can see like, oh, why are you? And to me, it bugs me because it's something sacred. Like somebody like Ed Milet is really trying to help people, and he's doing positive things. For somebody to take that and dirty it up or vilify what that is, it hurts me. And I feel like that makes me hesitant altogether. Is that something that you ever think about or that you stay on guard for when you are looking for new content in that space?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of people, when we do it, we all do it. Like as entrepreneurs, we don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? So we're going to take something that someone else said, we're going to twist it and make it our own, right?
Yeah.
And I think I do that a little bit, but
everybody does.
I have this genuine heart to really help people. But then you see these people out here that are online and they might have 1 million followers and they made $1 million in 6 months or whatever, right? And they're doing this. I've been in sales for 20 plus years, so I know what sales pitches look like. I understand when somebody's trying to pitch me something, and I'll call them out on it if they try to slide into my DMs and be like, "Hey, how are you?" Right? Like, all right, what's your pitch, dude? Just give it out, right? I am a little bit more cautious of people that are unknown that do, slide into my DMs and like, hey, check out this, right? So I think that, and I try to stick to the main guys, right? The guys that fire me up, and I've maybe heard their message over and over and over, but every time I listen to it, I'm hearing something that I didn't hear before.
Pick something new up.
Les Brown, probably one of my favorite speakers of all time, man. That guy is amazing. I love what he brings to the table, and his story also unbelievable. Just turned 76 years old, still doing speaking, man. And the guy is just out there just doing amazing things.
Oh man, that's awesome. And one thing I'd be very remiss if I didn't go back to it. I heard you mention at one point that you ended up managing a band for a year.
Yeah.
I'm curious, just quickly, how did you kind of get into that? And I'm curious, what lessons did you learn in that year of managing a band that you took with you to this day?
I made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, I bet.
I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't read the book, Dummy, how to manage a band for dummies, or anything like that, right? But I knew how to sell stuff, right? So I would try to sell these guys into bars in Seattle area. And it was an awesome band. They're called Altercate. And they split up eventually, and all the members are still kind of jamming, but like in their own separate ways. But yeah, man, I mean, it was fun. I knew the guys. It was my cousin was from Prosser, Washington, and that's where this band was from. And so I was introduced to one of the guys, and then that's how I got hooked up with those guys. They were kind of been playing around like small shows. I was living in Seattle. I was like, hey man, I'll take over. I'll manage you guys, start booking some shows. And I booked some good ones. I booked some really bad ones. So, like an all learning experience, but totally. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh man, that's awesome. I was very curious. I knew there'd be a story or two. There's probably a couple more stories that we probably can't say on this podcast from those times, for sure. Also kind of curious, what's exciting you in the world of MMA? Who do you see on the radar that gets you going? I know there's a ginormous card that I've been absolutely waiting months for this weekend that is coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of Dustin Poirier. I wish that Nate Diaz would fight again. I like Nate Diaz's style, man, and I know that a lot of people, you either hate him or you love him, and I've been a big fan of him.
Yeah,
I'm not a big fan of Conor McGregor. I know that everybody loves that guy, but I've never been a fan. I think he's a good salesman. He sells the fights good, but he's definitely not like the best fighter in the world.
No,
but he knows how to make the money. For sure.
Yeah.
So I love getting out there and just watching the fights as they come through. Yeah. And my main focus really is when I'm watching MMA, which is pretty rare. Like I read a lot of stuff, but my main focus is checking out these up and coming fighters that are getting on LFA cards and stuff like that. I'm excited about Bellator's going over to Showtime thing. I think that'll be a big move for those guys. That hopefully will get some more budget. Right. And I had Keone Diggs on my show a couple weeks back. Right. And he's on Bellator. And so he's a cool dude. So
very cool dude. I was saying he was awesome. I think he was probably one of my favorite ones I listened to. I really liked his style and just how he talks. His personality. I feel like, it's funny. You can hear him talk for 20 minutes or whatever it was. And you thought, oh, that guy's got something there. You can listen to a lot of guys talk, but it's intangible, but there's something about that, like, I feel like that's what, Sugar Sean was, as soon as I saw him on Dana White's Contender Series, oh, he has something special, right? And then every time he comes to the fight, you see a new fold of what he's bringing, right? And then you see him before his last fight. Even Joe Rogan on the broadcast said, like, this guy has something special. He's going to be a superstar, but it's not his skill set. It is his skill set. He has a skill set that is, a lot of people would kill for, but it's more than that. It's everything. And I feel like the biggest thing that makes me love him is his authenticity and his podcast. And he talks about the ups and the downs, his training, his mindset, the books he reads, the self-help, the breath work. Like, he will take you, if you want to go along for that journey with him, it's all there for the taking. He has a podcast where he will take you behind the scenes to the dark waters, to the deep places, to, his personal life. And I just love that about it. It's such a cool experience to now be someone that followed sports, but never to this degree, to be able to dive into it like that. And I'm so curious who that next person that's going to come up that allows people in, and you get to follow their whole ride from the times. Maybe, there's probably guys on the regional scenes right now that have a podcast that are doing that right now. We just don't know about them, and they're going to be there. You probably know about them. I don't, but that's what gets me excited. I think is just that next level.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me personally, like, I set this goal to interview a male and female fighter from every state.
Wow.
And I've just about done that in the US, but now I'm expanding to, other countries and things like that. So I've kind of kept this map of everywhere. Like, whenever they get on the show, I'm like, hey, where are you based out of, man? And I just pinpoint on my map. And so it's kind of a fun goal that I've had. And I have some states where I've had several fighters on, but there's a lot of states that I still haven't been able to connect with a fighter that's in that area. So, but it's kind of a fun thing that I like to do.
Well, if you start doing Canada, maybe I can help you get a few Alberta boys on there for
Nice.
Alberta girls and Alberta boys on there. Other provinces I might struggle a little bit. I mean, I'm trying to get them on my show myself, so I might have to do a little bit of sharing there. But no,
yeah, dude, you got to do the Instagram thing, man. Shoot them a video via Instagram Messenger. They'll pick up, man.
Honestly, a couple of those ideas, that and what was the other one? There's been a couple ideas where I was just, trying to stay focused on the interview and not let my mind go racing. Oh man, I really got to do that. There's been a couple of things I learned a ton from just this quick chat we had, and that's, I feel like one of the common threads of some of the favorite episodes I've had so far is just people that have podcasts, because I feel like I have such a passion for podcasting in general, that anyone that I can pick up those little tips and just doing this more often, of talking to people that are in the podcast market or whatever you call it. There's always, you can learn something from everybody, right? And there's just those people that take it to the next level, and you don't realize, you think you're working hard until you hear that, oh no, I'm not working that hard, I can do more. And then but I think that's the journey, right? You hear that with fighters too. They think they're a hot shit in their camp, they're the toughest guy, in Coeur d'Alene, and then they go to Jackson Wink, and oh, maybe I'm not the top dog anymore, and this is a new step, right? And then
Totally.
And then they go to down to Brazil to train some jiu-jitsu, and they realize, oh, maybe I'm not the top dog here. And I feel like those are the best people that have the best successes, that keep that mindset and are always doing that. One of the best examples of that for me is Brian Ortega after that last fight, finding a new striking coach. I knew that he had jiu-jitsu down 6 ways from Sunday, but really decided to expand these areas of his game and find elite people to teach him specifically, a boxing coach, a kickboxing coach, a wrestling coach, and started doing that. And you watch him come out and he didn't even look like the same guy. It was right. It was like a whole new fighter. And I just love that people can do that. And that is now setting the table for these up and coming fighters that saw that. And since it's such a young sport, now there's another example of something that can do. You can look like this fighter, take 6 months off, 9 months off, and come back like a totally new guy. And that just it's like breaking the 4-minute mile, right? As soon as one guy does it, oh, now that's possible. And now I'm just thinking all those, 16, 17-year-old kids that are excited and hungry, they're going to see that. And one day we're going to see the fruits of that labor pay forward in the MMA market as a whole. And I just get so excited for that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. A real honor to have you on. Somebody that's been in the podcast game this long. The more people I can learn from and pick up things here and there. Like I said, I was just trying to concentrate after a couple of those tips you gave me. My mind was just spinning. So I'll definitely bring some of those forward. And once maybe COVID clears up a little bit, maybe I can head down to the States and we can do it in person on the next one and come actually see you. Cause I feel like that's the next level. Is these Zoom ones are great, but man, after doing a couple episodes in person, is that that's the real stuff right there. So
yeah, I agree, man. Absolutely, dude. Such an honor to be on your show, man. I so appreciate it. Great conversation. You're a great host, dude. Keep doing your thing, man. I think you're killing it out there, man. So keep doing your thing.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks, Erik.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. If you want to check out Erik's podcast, Top Rated MMA Show and the Erik Allen Show, please let him know where you heard about him, if you heard about him here. He's got some great stuff. Good follow on Instagram, follow all that stuff. He's got a website, erikallen.com. I should have looked this up before I started talking. Who cares? You guys know I run things a little bit cattywampus at times, but that's how I like it, and that's how you guys like it. I hope that's how you guys like it, because that's how you're getting it. He's an awesome dude. Please check him out. Hope you liked the episode. Do all those fun things, like, subscribe, review, all those things. I don't know. You probably hear it on other podcasts. I don't really know. I don't know if it helps. I'm told it helps, but if you don't do any of that, that's fine too. Hope you liked the episode. Really good ones coming up. Anything big I'm forgetting? Hoping to start streaming stuff soon. Just got to figure it all out. Love you guys. Have a good day. Bye.